Hey guys, my name's Hey Vintage. We're going to break down the 2024 Fable trailer. It's taken me a little while to get to this, but let's get on with it because there is some really cool stuff in here.
Oh, right. Jew. So,
Immediately stopping here. The first voice that we hear is a very famous British actor. He's playing the role of Humphrey, a guy called Matt King, who you might know from Peep Show, played the character of Super Hands. Fantastic comedic actor. I'm really looking forward to seeing him more in the game if he is a main character. What we see on the screen here is his mace, um, which is just absolutely gorgeous. It seems like a really good fit for kind of the design style and also using a little bit more of like realistic history. We've got the guild seal here printed on the kind of like whatever's in these sacks. This is very similar to the Fable 3 guild seal, which is very different to the Fable 2 and the Fable 1 guild seal. It's the most like sleek design. The first one and the second one looks like very inconvenient items to have in your possession. What I will say, however, is the most important thing in this scene is neither the beautiful mace or the guild seal in the foreground. It's this portrait in the background. We're going to come back to this right at the very end of the trailer. But just for now, remember, you've got fingerless gloves, you've got red cloak, and you've got what looks to be a organic-ish staff, like a wizard staff. So yeah, we are going to come back to that shortly.
you want to know all about here?
Okay, immediately there's so much going on right from the very get-go here. This at first glance I thought was like health potions or on the worser side of things it could be coming to the new Fable game. Fable 3 handled a lot of spells by turning them into potions, which was not exactly well received. So like summoning and time control were potions. I didn't like that at all. I liked having those as actual spells. We lost those from the like spells you could cast from Fable 1 and Fable 2, and they became potions that you had to drink that would have that effect, and then you had a limited number of them. Managing them was difficult as well, mostly because the inventory system worked by the sanctuary. As a whole, I liked the sanctuary. I thought it was really cool. But for managing potions and stuff, it was very difficult. You couldn't really tell how many of them you had. You couldn't easily assign them and use them when you wanted. It was like a contextual pop-up. But then when I started looking at it more, I realized that this is probably something else. I think these are actually color dyes because the Fable games, at least Fable 2 and 3, system of customization that you have within it is dyeing your clothes. So you can dye your like hair, you can dye the primary and secondary color of all of the armors in the game. I say armors, I'm using that term loosely because Fable 1 had armor that had stats on it. Of like it would increase your defense and make you take less damage. In Fable 2 and 3, they dropped that. They had cosmetic armors which worked really well from one aspect because you could mix and match whatever clothes you wanted without being punished for it. So if you wanted to go out in the highwayman hat, the assassin's cloak, and a pauper skirt, you wouldn't be punished for that in gameplay. That's just the way your hero looks. I think with the addition of the bust of armor here and what I think are color dyes, it's potentially a confirmation that we're getting that method of customization back, but maybe also the return of armor. Humphrey is also seen as wearing like full plate armor. So I think it's quite likely that we're getting the return of armor. If it's going to come with stats or not, I don't know. I would lean towards yes, because I think game design has kind of moved in that direction since. Yeah, I'm excited for it. I think it's really good. I think it's a really nice little hint that we might be getting that. It got me really excited as soon as I realized what it might be. Let's carry on though.
Rose, dear. Well, you have come to the right place. Because who better to tell you all about them than...
Than than Matt King. So Matt King fantastic is doing a fantastic job of the voice acting. The attitude's right. The character's wearing the guild seal necklace. I really like it. He's like got that kind of self pompousness and arrogance that like Thunder had in Fable 1. My one thing is I wonder if they, and this is just completely hypothetical, but I wonder if they changed the character design because of the backlash that Richard Ayoade got as being the actual character in the game, in the cutscene. Like, it looked like him. So there was a fair amount of comments from people saying they like having the celebrities, like British comedians and British celebrities, in the games, but they don't want them to look like them. I think it works from two sides. It's both a positive and a negative, because people at the time will see it and be like, oh yeah, I know that. That's Matt King, or that's Richard Ayoade. And then in 10 years' time, they'll come back and they'll be like, oh yeah, I remember Richard Ayoade was quite a popular comedian back then. Not suggesting that he's going to fall out of the limelight at all. His career seems to be nothing but up, and he's a hilarious man. But also, at the time that their career is falling off, people aren't going to know who they are to recognize them. So yeah, I think it's a bit of a silly argument, really, but I do wonder if they changed the design of this character from looking like Matt King to this version of Humphrey, who I think will always be what I imagine now when I think of Humphrey. But I think the character matches the voice, or vice versa, whichever way. But that's pure conjecture. But what's a trailer breakdown without a bit of conjecture? It's all conjecture. Let's carry on.
Perhaps the greatest hero of them all. Yeah? There he is.
I really wanted to be able to pick something really clever out of this shot. I think it's fantastic. It looks gorgeous. It's perfect for that like pompous, full of himself hero. But the more I looked at it, I was like, I don't see anything except for a cool painting. There's probably a breakdown trailer out there somewhere. We're like, oh yeah, if you zoom in on this top left corner here and you look, you can see the shadow of the creeper. Sorry, not the creeper, the crawler. But yeah, I just looked at it. I was like, no, it's just a cool painting of the hero. He's got a shield. Never had shields in Fable. That'd be cool.
Cheers.
Beer making a return to Albion, of course. Humphrey. Again, we've got like guild seals on the beer barrel here and things like this. I don't think there's a ton to be found in this scene. I think that's the handle of Humphrey's mace again. This looks like it's probably his shield with a variation of the guild seal on the front. Yeah, very standard lavish. He's enjoying wine and grapes and stuff. Oh dear Lord, how gorgeous is the next like 3 scenes are beautiful. We've got Fairfax Castle here with the tower. This is a tower that we originally get shot in Fable 2. This I think is probably Bowerstone Old Town because of the orientation of Fairfax Castle and the close-knit shambles. This scene here and the next one more makes me lean in towards it being Old Town rather than Bowerstone Market, just because of how close everything is together. In Bowerstone Market, it's like a big open square with a few side streets off it. Although it is possible that this statue of probably maybe not Humphrey, because it's got a sword rather than a mace. This statue of a hero on here is different to the clock tower that we had in Bowerstone Market, and I think if you were going to update Bowerstone Market, the clock tower is quite iconic, so I think you would definitely keep that. Also, and this is maybe neither here nor there, but the name of the pub in Fable 2 and 3 that is in Bowerstone Market is the Cow and Corset, and this icon up here, this street sign, isn't really big enough to make out, but it's definitely not the Cow and Corset sign, which makes me think maybe it's Old Town or a different area. I guess all in all, I'm just really excited to see some more of Bowerstone, because it always gave the impression in like the Fable 2 opening trailer and some of the like zooming shots in Fable 3 that it was a really big city full of shambles all the way up to Fairfax Castle, and we only ever got to experience really small areas of it, like the industrial side of it in Fable 3, the market and the Old Town in Fable 2, and of course Old Town changes depending on what decisions you make at the start of the game. I would really love to have like a much more sprawling, explorable city with things to do in it and like open regions. But we'll have to wait and see.
I mean, sure, you get your mega fans.
You are like
At first, I thought this guy was wearing the same outfit as the hero, and I think it's probably just that it's more like inspired by the hero. But it's obviously bringing back and referencing that like fame system that we had in the previous games of like you have to work on your renown so that people like you.
Literally my favorite person.
Yep.
I really like this woman. I don't know why. I just think she's fantastic. She's really well dressed. She's really well voiced. She's really well animated. It just really made me chuckle.
Haters.
It's like a fan club, but we hate.
I have to say one thing. That hero is gorgeous. I really don't understand this whole like palaver that's being kicked up about the hero being ugly. Fable's never had pretty heroes. Fable 3 was the closest we got to aesthetically pleasing looking heroes, and even then they just looked kind of average and a little bit dated with the technology of the time. Everything was very smooth. I just think she looks like a person. There's a couple of dodgy frames in the previous trailer. I'll admit in a couple of them the proportions look off, but other than that, like I actually think she's gorgeous.
You.
Your chances and the occasion.
The toad. Okay, I love the toad. Humphrey talks about the toad in a specific way that made me think that maybe these toads are going to be the new updated version of the gargoyles and the gnomes in Fable 3. So I don't know if you guys, how familiar you are with the games, but in Fable 2 and Fable 3, it introduced a mechanic where in Fable 2 there were gargoyles around the world that you had to shoot and destroy, and they would shout insults at you as you were playing the game. So they'd yell things like, "My name's Barndor, bet you can't hit me." And then you'd shoot them, they would break, and once you shot 50, you would get access to like a special reward in the gargoyles cave. In Fable 3, you assisted a character called Mark Heap. He's ordered the last gargoyle from a catalog, and when you find it, it imbues his collection of gnomes to have the same effect, and they scatter across Albion, and you have to shoot them, and they yell similar things at you like, "I like little doggies. I like killing them and stuffing them into pies," and stuff like that. And it's great. Also, Mark Heap, fantastic in that role. I would love to see more of Mark Heap. But I'm wondering if, because of the way that Humphrey kind of says like, "Oh, and the odd toad," for some reason, I wonder if these guys are going to be like croaking insults at us, because I would love that. It would be great.
Giant toad for some reason. But it's more than that. It's about the choices you make.
That is a very important line in the Fable games. It's about the choices you make. It's a clear reference to the moralistic choices that you get to make throughout the game. Hopefully they're going to have similar impacts to the important choices that we made in the previous games, like that choice you make at the beginning of Fable 2 as to whether or not you give the warrants to the guard or you give the warrants to the criminal, because that changes whether or not Old Town becomes a really nice, well-to-do area, or if it becomes slums. And you get different options from that. You get different shops, you get different jobs become available depending on what choices you make, and that impacts the rest of the game. It's a bit of a shame in Fable 2 because it's kind of a simple choice, because the positive version of Old Town is way better than the negative, in my opinion, unless you want access to assassination missions right from the start of the game. That's a video for another time. But then in later games in Fable 3, what choices do we have in Fable 3? We had like the very start, if you spare Elise / Elliot or the protesters, depends on if you get like a follow-up quest later. If you spare Elise or Elliot at the start of the game, then they leave you and won't talk to you, but then towards the end of the game they reappear and they've kind of had time to think things over and reconsider. You also have like Fable 2's quests like Red Harvest, you have the Oakfield Massacre quests, like even dating all the way back to Fable 1. You have the protecting the farm right from the get-go is one of the first quests you get after you kind of make it through the prologue section. Fable 3, you have mining out mill fields, all the decisions you make at the end, which was kind of a ham-fisted delivery of those choices, but the choices were actually impacting the world. So I think this is just a callback to the fact that we are definitely getting more of that gameplay and that style of world building, and I'm completely here for it.
I'm a hero. I should do what I want.
You thought you could save her.
This shot's a little ambiguous. I feel like it's quite important. I know that we saw a Balverine in the previous trailer. The Balverine in the previous trailer, I honestly think just looked like a generic werewolf. I'm hoping that that gets reworked into a more Fable design. Like he was too chunky. He was too chunky, too like dog-like. And I know they are basically werewolves. They are a play on werewolves, if not a rip-off of werewolves. But I'm hoping we see Balverines again. I think this might be a callback to maybe he thought he could save like a family member from becoming a Balverine and it causes issues down the line. Again, pure conjecture, who knows? But the shot's gorgeous. The lighting's beautiful.
You know, it's your life and
No idea who this man is or where he is. Probably pretty cool though.
death stuff. That's what defines you.
Now, at first, I wanted to say this isn't Humphrey because his armor is gold and they're wearing silver sabatons. However, I went back and looked, and Humphrey is wearing a combination of gold, silver, and red armor. So, like his gambeson underneath is red, his sabatons and his stomach plate are silver, his chest plate and his shoulders, I think, are gold, and his mace is gold. So, this is almost certainly Humphrey in a bar threatening a man, and from the look he gives us in a second,
And that really stays with you.
that it really stays with you. The look away from the camera makes me feel like maybe Humphrey got a little bit drunk and did something he shouldn't have done, and it stuck with him. But it again, that's putting emphasis on the moral choices and it having impactful changes throughout the game. Really, I want to see the horns and halos come back. Like, I loved that in Fable 2. Like, Fable 3, you could see your like evil or good visage when you flourished, when you did a flourish attack. But other than that, it got a little bit lost in Fable 3, whereas in Fable 2, like the horns, the like cracked skin, or the like the blonde hair and your dog turned like completely blonde. Like, I really liked all that stuff. I'm hoping it makes a return. This tree has got to be something, right? I'm not really sure what it is. There's a few things like that come to mind. At first, I was like, oh, they're just hanging baskets from a tree, and it's a pretty area. And then I've obviously been playing too much Diablo 4 because my brain jumped to the Tree of Whispers in Diablo 4, which has like heads hanging from it. And I was like, oh, it could be heads. But then I looked closer, I was like, it's almost definitely hanging baskets. So there's the potential that these could be like wisp nests, maybe. And when you get near them, they'll spawn hollows out of the ground. However, that again, it feels like a stretch. Even for me, that feels like a stretch. I think this might just be a pretty scene with some nice hanging baskets. The audio going on here is Humphrey talking about a hero he once knew, and who the trailer I feel is leading us up to believing it's the female hero we're seeing throughout. I think that's a mislead intentionally, and I'll carry on talking about why that is a little bit later as we get into it.
I knew this one hero. I took her in when she had nowhere else to go. Welcome to the most...
So this is a shot of what is supposed to be the Heroes Guild, and it's completely empty, which is kind of echoing another like time period like Fable 2. Like, the Age of Heroes is almost over. The public are kind of fed up with heroes for the most part, and so we might end up with more of that kind of like attitude and a sparse guild hall. But we've got a really cool marble statue of Humphrey up here, and the stonework's gorgeous. I'm really looking forward to exploring this environment.
exclusive club in all about.
There's that red gambeson, silver stomach plate, gold chest and shoulders I was talking about.
Albion. Thought I'd get her out there, make the most of her gift.
Again, this is all trying to make you think that Humphrey is talking about the female hero. I don't think he is. I think he's talking about the woman from the painting at the beginning that was torn in half.
But you know what it's like when you're young and you have a point to prove.
I felt like I was going to wet myself when I saw this. I love the trolls. More specifically, I love the trolls in Fable 2. in case you haven't guessed, Fable 2 is my favorite out of the series. It's the one I started with, which I think is kind of true for a lot of people. They like the one they started with. But I really enjoyed the mechanics of the troll fights in Fable 2. I'm not going to lie and say that the troll at the end of the Crucible didn't completely screw up my time by hiding his nerve tendrils a couple of times throughout the amount of times I played through that game. However, I thought they're really interesting enemies. They kind of annoy me in Fable 1 because they just chuck rocks at you and cause an AoE if you get too close. And quite often it'll spawn two, and dealing with them is an absolute pain in the ass. There isn't really any good way to fight them. You have no indication of how much damage you're doing to them. So they always kind of bugged me. And yes, I know you can bat the rocks back at them, but that requires timing that my teeny tiny lady hands are not built for. The Fable 2 trolls, you could have used speedrunner strats using time control and a powerful AoE to kill them in one shot, which is, if you're looking to speedrun the end of the Crucible, that's how you do it. But the like dancing around, shooting the nerve tendrils, if they had a few more attacks and actually moved around, which this one is moving around, they'd be a much more threatening, much more engaging enemy to fight. The trailer's going to move away from the troll and come back to it later, so we're going to do the same. We're going to let it move away, talk about some stuff, and then we're going to come back to it later as well.
I tell you, this kid, she had it all.
Also, he throws a cart at the hero, so there's a fair chance that he's going to throw boulders and stuff that you can back at him again, which I think is a fun mechanic. I just need to get good. Okay, this scene goes real quick. And there's a lot going on here. So we'll start with this freeze frame here. These are hobs, which are children lured into the night by evil voices that turn them into these little goblin creatures. We have these bright lights floating in the air, and what we have two spells going on here. At first, I thought it was just what looks like a vortex spell. Just going to scrub the timeline a little bit, so apologies for the audio here. So the hero here casts what looks like a vortex spell. So watch these next few frames. As she draws the arrow back, the arrow lights up. You see that little magic effect on the arrow? That is very reminiscent of the multi-shot spell from Fable 1, which I think was a real missed opportunity in Fable 2. The guns were powerful enough in Fable 2 that you didn't feel you needed it, but it's a fun spell. It's a really big power boost. The other thing I've noticed, and I checked this in Paint afterwards, if we bring it to this frame here, just before it goes, there is a direct line all the way along here, straight to that Hobbs crotch. And now this is a stretch, but Fable 2 had a feature called sub-targeting on ranged attacks, where you could lock onto an enemy, and then while locked onto that enemy, you could lock on to a sub-target of that enemy, and that included the head, both hands, both feet, and the crotch. So, like, multi-arrow attack, firing right at the crotch in the middle of a vortex spell, could be really, really cool. The last thing I'll say about this scene, and it's another stretch, is that these lights kind of remind me of the nymphs from Fable 1 that summon enemies to fight you. Occasionally they do summon hobs, so it could be fighting a nymph that summoned hobs, and this is how she's dealing with it. But again, that seems like a bit of a stretch. It could just be that the hobs have discovered festoon lighting. Who knows?
The talent.
Here we have, that's an execution animation. They've been present in Fable 2 and Fable 3, the little like slow down it does. I'm just going to frame by frame it because this section's very quick. Here. So she catches the bolt fired from the crossbow, and we're going to ignore the fact that it's confirmation of crossbows for just a moment. And talk about the fact that this is a D&D 5th edition 3rd level monk ability. Catch the projectile and then spend a key point to throw it back at him. I really like the attention to detail here. Look at that, like, air travel. The line on like how fast she's throwing this thing. But yes, this man is using a crossbow, which is a confirmation of crossbows. So far we've seen bow and arrows and crossbows. Somebody in a comment mentioned that they had seen a blunderbuss in one of the scenes in a previous trailer. I went back and I couldn't find it. Doesn't mean it's not there. I think it puts it in that era after Fable 1, before Fable 3, around a similar time to Fable 2, maybe earlier in the history. And another thing I noticed here is this looks a little bit like Hero Hill. So this could be taking place in Bower Lake, because that almost looks like Hero Hill. Okay, next we get to talk about my favorite thing.
She was something else, all right.
So when I mentioned the troll before, I talked a little bit about the nerve tendrils that you used to have to attack. This looks like it could be a new version of that. It looks like there is a parasite in the troll's mouth that is what keeps it alive and maybe makes it hostile. So you'll notice here, as she rips it out, the light in the troll's eyes goes out and it falls like inert. It stops being a threat. She's also no longer worried about it at that point. So it really reminds me of, I don't know if you've heard of it, but there's like a parasite that lives among fish that will swim into a fish's mouth, eat their tongue, and take the place of its tongue, eating all the food that the fish tries to eat until the fish dies, and then it finds a new host. So I'm wondering if maybe we're going to have a mixture of hostile trolls infected with this parasite and non-hostile trolls that haven't been infected with the parasite. I think that'd be a really cool and interesting take on it.
Terrifying. So, yeah, I knew this girl once who made all the wrong choices.
Humphrey. She's back.
So I think this scene is specifically designed to make you think Humphrey has been talking about this female hero the whole time and she's walked up behind him and it's all really awkward, which is a funny story beat. But I don't think he is. I think he's talking about this woman from the painting at the very beginning of the trailer. And they've both had to deal with her in the past. He's saying that she made all the wrong choices. I love that sound drop. It's so good.
I'm going to fix it, this place. And no one is going to stand in my way.
Okay, so here we see both of the heroes together. It's not an immediate threatening situation, like they don't jump straight into combat, so they obviously have some kind of personal relationship with this adversary. We see the red cloak, the fingerless gloves, the kind of naturally woven staff that we saw at the very beginning with that painting. The painting's also been half torn off, hiding like the identity of this character, but also I think that kind of leans into it being a former mentee of Humphrey's, and that's why he's upset. He feels betrayed by them for whatever reason, and that's why he's ripped the painting down, and that's why he's not so keen to just immediately engage. We see some really cool magical effects coming off them. The line that they speak, the "I'm going to fix this place and no one's going to stand in my way." Now, that is a very Teresa line to say. We've never seen Teresa with a staff, but that doesn't mean that's not the way that they'd reimagine her. I think there's a couple of options for who this character could be. There is who I mentioned, there's Teresa, would be a very popular pick. She's a fan favorite character. She's got a lot of depth. She's got really good motivations and a really cool backstory. But they might not want to lean into a character we've seen previously and that has so much history built up. They might want to work with a new character. We also have a bit of a left field pick here, which I quite liked, is Scarlet Robe, who is the parent of the protagonist of the first Fable game, who wears a red cloak. However, she wields a giant great axe, and when we look at the painting, it's quite clear that that's not a really big axe over her shoulder. It's not that you can't hold an axe that way. It's mostly just that some of the blade would be in frame from what's left of the painting. So I don't think it's going to be Scarlet Robe, but again, that would be a really cool pick. And the third choice, and I think this is my favorite, is the Queen of Blades, who is from what's called the Court. So this is going into extended lore of the Fable universe. In the first game, the antagonist was Jack of Blades, who is a very, very cool character just the right amount of edgelordy. However, in the first game, completely lacked depth. In my opinion, I'll probably get some hate for that. There was no real backstory to him, no explanation of who he was or why he wanted to do what he was doing, without you then going and reading books that were published later that aren't in main circulation and difficult to get hold of that information. But he's from an otherworldly entity, and he arrived in Albion with the Queen of Blades, the Knight of Blades, and himself, Jack of Blades. They're all very mysterious figures. Jack of Blades is actually an entity that is possessing his mask, and that's how he's managed to be a hero in every single generation for hundreds of years. We've never seen Queen of Blades or the Knight of Blades, so I think it would be a really cool choice to bring in one of those characters and maybe explore the lore behind the court and get into them a little bit more. I would like to say in Fable 2, we do see the Court of Shadows, who have given Reaver his eternal youth in exchange for regular sacrifices. I believe that the Shadow Court is separate to the court. It's only referenced in the wikis as the court. I've always thought it was the Court of Blades because the Knight of Blades, the Queen of Blades, and the Jack of Blades. I'm going to briefly mention the fact that it kind of bugs me that Queen and Jack are playing cards and the Knight is a chess piece, although the Queen is also potentially a chess piece, but the Jack is not. And that kind of bugs me that they've mixed those two things. Anyway, there's some really interesting stuff going on here, and that kind of brings us to the end. Coming in 2025, that makes me very happy. I'm going to be booking a week off work, and I'm going to be streaming the whole thing. I'm going to pretend I'm a full-time streamer for a week. I'm going to do hours of streaming a day and then hours of editing as well, so that we can get loads of content out. So if you want to come along for that ride, I'm currently at the very start of a playthrough of Fable Anniversary on heroic mode, which is getting me killed a lot. We've just finished a Fable 2 playthrough. I'm uploading 2 to 3 hour VODs of that every week at the moment. The first one's already out if you want to check that out. Otherwise, catch me on twitch.tv/heyvintage. Thanks very much for stopping by, guys. Look after yourselves. Bye for now.